So, much like my last video, this is another one of those different videos, but I think it might be fun to kind of see how the exploration goes. So, today I'm exploring, can music become part of your life story? And the most obvious answer to that is straight away, yes, of course it can. But that's what made me curious about the question. I started thinking, is music just something we listen to, or does it become attached to who we are and what we remember and the people who we meet? Which is basically our story. Who we are, what we remember, the people we meet, all create the story of who we are. So why do some songs feel like memories when others just feel like a song? I've always kind of been curious about that question. There's some songs that you listen to, it's just like, oh, this is a nice vibe. But there's other songs that you listen to that are collected? Connected to like another moment. Like the best song that I can think of, the song that I just came to my mind the moment I started thinking about this video was like, oh, what's that song? Apologize if I can. Anything I don't mean. I can't think of what the name of that Drake song is. But that Drake song, if anyone could tell me the name of that song, it'd be much appreciated. Like, what's up with your girlfriend? See, I still can't even think. I was trying to go through the song like to try to get to the chorus, but I was still in the verse, and I still can't remember. I can't think of what the song is. But if you know the song, please let me know in the comments. I'm sure I'll get. I'm sure. I just keep thinking to myself, it's at the tip of my tongue, the name of the song. But there's another song, Drake and Rick Ross, Stay Scheming. Stay scheming. Wanna me. Cause I ride for my stay scheming. And that song, that song just reminds me of like university, because whenever we were like pre-drinking and stuff like that, like stay scheming and all like golden era Drake songs. Golden era. All them golden era Drake songs were playing. And when I say golden era, I mean like, like Started from the Bottom and all them bangers back in the day when it was like Young Money and it was, jeez. Young Money, all those songs. I can't even think of that Young Money song, but there was that Young Money song where it was, Lil Wayne was on it, Drake was on it, Nicki Minaj was on it, maybe Tyga was on it. I can't. Bedrock was it called, or I can't remember the name. But yeah, that banger. I'd say golden era because nowadays Drake. I'm sorry to say, I'm not. This is not even about Drake, but what's going on with the music, man? Anyway, the reason why this video is kind of centered or connected to music is because when I was trying to figure out what to talk about, what question to explore, usually when I'm trying to figure out what to explore, I go over my life and I'm thinking, what have I done? What have I been doing? What would be the need for me, what curiosity have I uncovered in my life recently that would be interesting to explore deeper, that maybe has sent me down a rabbit hole. And this question was, it was kind of the thing where I explored it first, because I thought back over last week, and last week was kind of like a creatively, what's the word? Creatively, I can't even think of the word. Creatively motivated. That's not the word, but that's the word I'm going with. Creatively motivated. So I was basically the start of the week, went to work. After work, I was in the studio. I was engineering a song for one of my friends. He was making a song for his wedding, for his first dance. And because I'm a music producer, I was just also sound engineering the whole session. We went to my mate's cousin's studio, and what was interesting about that was the fact that when we were trying to figure out where we were going to record it, my friend remembered his cousin, and he was just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I didn't think about him sooner, because he was the cousin that introduced him to music and rapping. And I think my friend plays the trumpet. No, my mistake. He plays the saxophone. So I think I remember him saying that he used to go to that studio and just practice the saxophone all the time and just play in the studio and rap and hear the music and stuff like that. And I was just like, wow, this studio space holds so much for you. And now we're going to record something for such a big moment for you in a place that holds so much history for you. It's the reason why you thought to do this in the first place, even. And the session was really interesting for me because I haven't engineered a session in forever, especially one with a live musician. I haven't done that in a while, but it was really fun because I started saying something to myself after I finished mixing and mastering the song. I was thinking to myself, I'm kind of like the narrator of this song, kind of like in the terms of the person that edits the film that you end up watching is technically the one that puts it all together. He gets loads of files of footage, and he knows how the story is meant to be put together and how it's meant to be told. But then it's down to his skill, which puts together that film to make it a story. And this is similar with a sound engineer or a music producer, in the sense of once I had all the stems of the singer singing the main line, the backing vocals, the guitar line, the bass, there was drums, what was it called? Oh, I can't remember what it was called, but it was basically percussion. And then there was this beautiful strings line. And then just putting it all together, layering all the stems together. And then it's just one thing I think people don't understand is, like, especially when you're editing something, you spend so much time listening to that song over and over again. And for first thing, it's useful because it's good to know the source that you're working on. But also, when a song is, especially for me, a song is more than a song. Yes, it's music, but also someone's telling a story to you through song. Someone has spent time writing, going through things so that they could share this experience, this story, this excerpt from their life with you. So for me, especially knowing, being part of that creation, whenever I hear that song, because it's a cover song, so whenever I hear the original, I'm all crazily enough, I'm gonna think about mixing and mastering the cover, and remembering what this moment is for. It, it's kind of hard to put it into words exactly the way the hours, but the way how just listening to layers and placing them in the correct order. Maybe you have to use an EQ, maybe you have to compress it, maybe there's reverb, and then you have to make every element sit as if they're one, but then also separate. And like I said, every time I'll hear this song, I'll think about mixing and mastering. But then also the beauty of this song becoming part of my life story, but then also my friend's life story overarchingly, because it is only going to be a blimp in my story compared to the massive piece of my friend and his fiance or wife to be story going forward, especially for what the song is for, their first dance together. And I just couldn't think of more of a beautiful moment. It was just more like I spent my 9 to 5 at work, and then the moment I got home, I ate dinner, and then just those late night sessions. And I was literally working from maybe like 10 till like 2, 3 in the morning. But it was because I had a schedule to get to, like I said, session. We had the recording session on the Monday, and I needed to get the master done by Friday. So the only way to get that done is just non-stop, just mixing, and then send it over versions so that the rest of the people involved in the project can hear where it sounds like. If maybe I need to change something up, or maybe they feel like something's missing, or like there was a part where the vocalist, when she heard the first rough mix that I made of the vocals just when I got home from the session, just so I could hear the vocals a little bit better, she felt as though that she wanted to edit or add or remove parts. But once I had finally mixed the vocals completely into one, I would say one, but I used a different arrangement. Like there was a moment when we were in the session when she played back the main vocals and we were listening to her backing vocals, and she was like, "Can you turn down the main vocals just so I can hear the backing vocals more?" And when we listened to it on playback, it was just like a light bulb hit in my head, and I was like, "This is the arrangement." And she was like, "What do you mean? We're just listening." I was like, "Nah. This sounds sick." Like having the backing vocals as the main vocals, and the main vocals, the main continuous vocals as the backing vocals. It sounds crazy, but because of the emotion that was in the song, the main backing vocals was one line, but there was more feeling, I guess, in the backing vocals, that I wanted to make that stand out as more of make it stand out. So then when you listen to it back, the main continuous line felt like the call to the response of the backing vocals. I don't know, if you're a music producer and you're watching this, maybe you find that what I just said interesting, but maybe not. Well, I don't know. I'm just second guessing myself. I sat there talking and closing my eyes and having these visions back of these sessions, mixing and mastering and listening to those songs back. It's like, it sounds like a long process, and it absolutely is, making sure like everything sounds right. But at the same time, I had the maximum level of fun. Like, I don't think anyone can understand unless you do it too. But it was so much fun. And yeah, which then leads me on to the next moment of my week of last week, or even the weekend, was because like after I finished mixing and mastering, I finished mastering the track on Friday, no, Saturday, like three. I must have finished mixing at like 2:30. Mastering about 2:30 a.m. But anyone that knows anything about it is like, once you finish the mix, you can't. It's not just finishing the mix. You then have to like bounce it down. You then have to listen to it on multiple sources. You need to listen to it on your phone, maybe through speakers, through headphones, through your laptop, like just so you can know that it sounds correct. So after I'd done all these different tests, and then it must have been about, yeah, I must have finished about 3, and then it must have been about 3:30 by the time I finished all the tests, and I was like, yeah, this is done. And I was getting into bed about 4 a.m. Saturday morning. I woke up later Saturday morning, around maybe 10:30, and then I was like, I had to get myself ready out the house to head off to a festival. And I went to this festival called Tribal Earth Festival. I don't know if anyone's been there. It's more of like a bit of a wellness festival mixed with musical vibes. And it was, I mean, as I say we, the royal we, went down there with a band that I do videography for and social media for. Band is called Vibe Machine. If you get a chance, check them out on YouTube or social medias. I'll put the information either on the screen over here maybe, or above my head, or maybe down here on the table. Or maybe I'll just put it in the description. I don't know. Bit will be there somewhere. But so I was with Vibe Machine, and we went down in a van. The whole band was in there, the whole journey, and it was actually really fun because on the way down we played this word association game. This word association game where you had to say the name of a band or a musical act who has had a single that has charted, and the name of that artist or band had to come from the last letter of the name of the band or artist that the person before you said. So say, for example, I said Justin Bieber. The next person would have to have their band or artist name start with an R, but they could also use bands or artists that start with the, and use the first word after the as the the name of the band that they're using. So say, for example, I said Justin Bieber, the next person after me could say the Rolling Stones, because Rolling Stones is the R, but they also go by the Rolling Stones. And then and that went on, and that took up basically 2.5 hours of our journey there. And then we got to the festival, we set up camp because we were staying over the night. We explored the festival a bit. was kind of interesting because there's a bit of a ban on campfires at the moment because we've been having a few forest fires here in the UK. And so usually people would have their own fires and they would cook for themselves. But because there wasn't that this time, it meant that the food stands got a lot of attention, which is great, obviously. It means that these businesses get more custom, but it also meant that the businesses were more busier than they had expected. So, but you know, that goes and comes with the territory of these things, of these festivals. You only know what you know until you know it. But back to the festival itself, after we performed and I was filming the band, and then there's parts where I do backing vocals on a few songs. So there was like the first part of the set list, the first part of the set list, like the first 5 songs, I'm not on stage. So I get time to like film the band, do some panning shots, film the audience, dancing and stuff like that. And they were vibing, they were loving the vibe machine. And then there was like moments where one moment I was filming, next minute I was on stage. After that I jumped back off stage and then I was filming again. And then back on stage for 3 songs. And after that, after we performed, we packed down and we handed out business cards, and the band were talking to people that were coming up to them and congratulating them on their performance and how much they enjoyed the vibe. And then when I was outside afterwards, I was chilling and speaking to a few of the band members about our performance. There was a guy that came over to me and he started basically telling me his origin story for the festival. And first of all, he was just like, oh my gosh, I love Vibe Machine. It was apparently the first time he had actually seen Vibe Machine perform. And he was blown away from the performance because he had known the keyboard player from Vibe Machine for 26 years. And this is where the interesting part came for me. He started telling me the story. He was like, oh, you know, I've been going to this festival for 26 years. And it's only in the last couple of years where I've started helping in this festival and, you know, giving back to the festival that I love so much. Like I remember I went to speak to them the other day, 2 years ago, and I was like, can I help? And they were like, yeah, we would love to have your help. And now I help maintain make sure it's clear and safe and there's no rubbish around for all the people who experience this beautiful place. And the part of the story that I'm missing out is that he's also mentioned that he's known the keyboard player from Vibe Machine for 26 years. And within that, he said that 26 years ago, he had a conversation with the keyboard player, and we can call him his stage name, Odd Job Man. And he had a conversation with Odd Job Man, and Odd Job Man had he had a conversation with him. And from what I got from the festival goer turned festival helper is that this conversation that he had with our job man basically changed his life. And I was just blown away. I was just like, what was the conversation? What was it that he said to him? What was it that he said to you? And he told me that basically he told him to stop being so much more of a audience member and a fan and get more involved in the musical scene. And so he did. And that one conversation, that one moment changed the entire course of his life. So much so that he can't help but tell this story to every person that he came into contact with that evening. And I was just blown away. And to be honest, what it made me think about is that I started thinking about how it's interesting that one conversation can change the course of your life. One song can become part of your entire story without you even writing it. Not that you need to write a song for it to become part of your story, but the same way you can read a book and it becomes part of your story. Or you take elements to make up your story, like some kind of patchwork. So it makes me question, why do some conversations become stories we keep telling? I'm not sure. I mean, maybe I answered it somewhat in what I just said, but how's that? What about for you? If those even words made sense. And then when we were on the journey ride, those words didn't make sense. When we were on the ride journey, I don't even know what I'm trying to say now. When we were on the way back from the festival the next day, those are English words and in the correct grammar. We were playing music, or one of the band members was playing music. And I found it interesting that they too had these moments where a song played and they were like, oh my gosh, I remember when I first heard this song, or there was a song that I suggested or asked to be put in the playlist, and she heard it and she was just like, one of the band members heard it and she was just like, oh my gosh, I haven't heard this song in ages. I hadn't even thought about this song. This makes me think of the gospel version. And I was just like, oh, wow. But if it wasn't for me recommending that song to be played, she would never have had that moment of realization. And it kind of brings me on to, if you were present at the beginning of the video, where I was like singing those songs, I don't know, I probably think in most of my videos, there's probably moments where I'm just singing a song. And it generally comes from the part or the place of like Corey FM. Like inside my head, there's either a song playing and most of the time it's just playing in my head, in the background, in my subconscious. And then sometimes, though sometimes happens more often than some, but there's still sometimes, these songs will just come out and I'll just be singing this song and I'm just singing this song, I'm saying all the words, like getting into the lyrics and stuff like that. And very small parts of those times, I will actually know what song I am singing. I'll get to the chorus maybe and I'll be like, shit, maybe it's this song. But for the 9 times out of 10, I'm singing a song and I have no idea what the song is, no idea what the connection is, where it came from, how I know the lyrics, and none of it. But the song's playing and I'm singing along and I'm grooving and I'm dancing. And then it might be some time where like I might be singing this song. Sometimes I'll be on the phone to my friends and I'm singing this song and they'll be like, that's that song. And I'm like, oh my days, is that what that song is? News to me, now I know what the song is. Or like I'm just singing it at a band rehearsal, someone's like, that's that song. And I'm like, geez, thank you, because otherwise I would have just been singing that song. It would have come again on the FM, it would just been spinning and I'd be like singing it, dancing along and not knowing what the song is. And probably songs I have listened to or songs I have heard, but like when it comes up on Corey FM, I don't know why the connection or what the connection is. I just know these songs came out, they passed a subconscious layer into the real world, and now they're being sung out loud or rapped or whatever it is, muttered under my breath, depending on what situation, what situation I'm in. And when I make music, a lot of the time, if I'm making stuff with an actual melody, I'm playing the keys or something like that, and I'm not using a sample. In those times, there's melodies that play in my head that I can play by feeling out, but like I know what a chord is, I know what the keys are, but telling you what I played or figuring out to replicate that another time is another story, which is why I want to learn to play the piano, which would just close that gap. Because when I hear these melodies, I'm like, oh, that's dope. Let me sing it into a voice note so later I can try and make this. And 9 times out of 10, I somewhat come up with what I was playing in my head, or maybe it's a different melody, or it turns into something else. But on the subject of something starting in one place and turning into something else, it kind of brings me on to my poetry. Sometimes it starts as a song. Sometimes I'm at my computer, I've made somewhat of a beat. By somewhat of a beat, there's a melody and there's drums. Maybe some percussion, maybe there's some hi-hats, some percussion in the background, and I've got the bass to the song. And then I start arranging it. And then either I start saying a poem that I have off the top of my head, or a poem that decides to re-alive itself into my mindset that I didn't even know that I had memorized or had forgotten that I had memorized. And I'll just start saying these words, and sometimes it's stuff I know, sometimes it's stuff I don't know. If it's stuff I don't know, then it's just like, oh cool, I might have a new poem on my hands. But sometimes, and very rarely recently, but sometimes, I have songs which I have performed as poems where when I originally brought it into conception, I created a beat around it and everything. But then when I go and perform it at an open mic, I perform it without the beat. And recently, with my performance style, I've started mixing singing with my poetry, which is a new thing because I wasn't super confident with my singing to begin with, regardless of what anyone would say to me. I wasn't confident. And it got to a point where I was just like, let me just try this. I think it was basically when I first got into poetry, I was like performing from, I think, like 2017 until 2019, like non-stop. I was going to literally every single event that I could go to, every single event. Like there were like not an evening that if there was a poetry event going on, doesn't matter what part of London it was in, I was there and I was performing. And I did it just non-stop for 2 years. And after that time, I was just burnt out. And I was just like, I need a break. I need a break. And then it was around 2019, I had a little break. And I remember 2020 started and I was just like, yes, this is my year to come back to poetry. And then we had the Panorama that happened. And in the Panorama, or the pandemic, We had that hit at the start of 2020, and in the pandemic, I was watching this series called Carol on Tuesday. And anyone that knows me, I don't know if I've mentioned it to you, but if I haven't, then you need to check it out. Carol on Tuesday is one of the best animes that I have ever watched on Netflix. It's But yeah, it's one of the best animes I have watched, full stop, as well, actually, to be honest. And only thing I'm upset about is that there's only one season, but what a season it is. So Carol on Tuesday is basically set in a world where AI music dominates the mainstream. Like, and back in 2020, when I was watching this, I was just like, oh my gosh, this is like kind of a cool futuristic anime. Like, it's not any way impossible that this would happen in like, and it was crazy. I was literally watching it thinking, this wouldn't happen. I'm sure like we would push back as humans. Like, there was no way we would make this reality. And it's interesting because in that world, it's set somewhere in the future, like 2030 or 2040, or maybe it was 50 or something like that. But somewhere in the future that's somewhat, or maybe it was like 30, maybe it's 1,000 years in the future. But I can't remember the exact time point. Don't quote me on that. But anyway, the interesting part is what makes Carol on Tuesday so interesting and kind of cool to me, and kind of inspirational about like kind of humanity more than anything, is that they create music in the old way. So Carol and Tuesday, I think one of them, I can't remember which one. One of them plays the guitar, one of them plays the keys, and they're a duo act, and they literally, like I say, go back to the old school. They start writing songs, playing music, all instruments together, and creating melodies naturally. And when they start hitting the scene, they take the world by storm, because the world had, at that point in time in this anime, had been so conditioned to anime, to AI music being the norm, that when they actually heard two humans singing with their natural voice, no AI vocoder to help their singing ability, no AI voice changer, no AI anything, just two humans playing musical instruments, and it blew people away. There was like, there was moments where I think on episode that where they went to see like old musical greats who like used to make music back in the day with musical instruments, but then changed with the times and started making AI music. And then they started hearing Carol on Tuesday's music, and it was just like, oh my gosh, this is real music again. And what makes it funny for me is now in 2026, we're kind of edging more closer to that reality as we speak, as the days, hours, minutes move on. And it's both scary and also exciting. Exciting in the sense of, I love that people are fighting back, but scary in the sense of that the fact that these models are trained on our music, independent creators and big stars all in one. It's trained on all of it. And we had no choice, and we're not being paid for any of this training data. And that's why when you hear AI songs, it sounds so much like this artist, or it sounds so much like that artist, or it's basically a model that's trained on replicating in a different variation. And to think that that could be the future that we're heading towards, I love that people and platforms are fighting back, because if you watch Carol and Tuesday, like, it seems scared. Like, literally, it scared me watching it, because I was like, oh my gosh, like, people don't even they just, what, buy an AI device and just suddenly they're singers now? Anyone can do it? And then there was, like, obviously once the AI, and then the AI, and there was the music industry, and they were still controlling things and I was just like, oh man, like, yeah, everyone has to get their fingers dirty in the pie. I don't believe that's a saying, but it should be. Because if you got your fingers in the pie, or in the pie, it's going to get dirty with, like, the inside of the pie. And then you kind of think back to, in its simplest form, and I'm not saying this, but in its simplest form, AI is just a form of technology. And when I mix and master songs, I use my computer, which is another form of technology. And I will make this point very much clear. I am not saying that AI and computers are any much the same. I understand the difference, but I'm just saying, if we strip it back to its simplest form, it is just a piece of technology. And I also use the piece of technology to help me master a song. But AI and that process are not the same. I'm not making a confusion. I'm just making a comparison. A comparison. But still, it begs the question, where is the human interaction when AI becomes the creator of the music? Like, it's one thing to use a voice changer, but when you're just writing a prompt and then getting vocals in return, that's not the same as a singer who's trained or not trained to sing, and they're just singing about these songs that they're writing or they want to share with the world, or this rapper is. But I guess at the same time, it's about the creativity you put into it, I guess you can say. But again, at the same time, it's just, I'm not trying to be a musical purist, and I understand the implications of technology in music. But on this front, it feels like, I hate to even say this, but it feels like they want to replace us. The first thing I started thinking about when I saw AI music is, the record labels want to get ahead of this. They're going to be against it to begin with, but then they're going to start partnering up, which is what they're doing with some of these companies. And then I started thinking, what happens to posthumous albums? Like, who's to say they just put together with AI a posthumous album and release it, and they're like, this is some new stuff and some old stuff we found in the studio, and then we mixed it with, like, the artist and and new artists and You wouldn't know for sure unless there was specific things in the artifacts. But who knows what they could do in the future when they actually do try and do this, if they try and do this. I'm just being a bit cynical about it. So So basically, it becomes the story behind the song versus the story the listener attaches to the song. Not with AI, but also with AI and the connection with Carol and Tuesday. There was also kind of like a full circle moment in a way, I guess, that I had. If we go off the point of one conversation can become prophetic in your life. And I remember a moment in university when I was doing like music stuff. I was in the studio a lot, and there was a rapper that I was told that I need to speak to. I need to get in the studio. They're absolutely amazing. And she was around that time. She was more of a poet, but she was getting into rapping more. And like I was part of the first layer of before she skyrocketed into the rapping and the performances that she's doing right now. Absolutely loved seeing her journey, actually, especially being part of those first times in the studio. But there was a moment in that time where I was pure poetry. Poetry is poetry. I was just like, nah, not about mixing the music with the poetry. It's just, I feel like poetry just needs to stand alone as itself. And she said to me, there's going to be a time in the future where you're looking back at this moment and you're thinking, I was right. And that moment came full circle when I started messing around with my beats and making some songs for myself and mixing poetry with music and singing and stuff like that. And I literally sent her a message like, you're all right. It did happen. Which kind of brings me on to like the books in my life. The book that I think I've brought up a few times over the last few videos, this book Cuddy, which I've been reading, I would say probably for the last 3 months. I'm literally coming to the end of it. I'm on like page number 325 and there's 338 pages. So I've got like 13 pages left. And that's why I feel like I am in the correct position, because it was only in the last few pages, last 80 pages or so, like in this last book, or chapter, where I've figured out basically why Cuddy is so well told in different forms. Like through poetry and prose and plays and historical accounts and diary entries and chants and songs. Like in the beginning, it's poetry and prose and diary entry and anecdotes and history accounts, just constantly changing. And I just didn't understand it in the beginning. I just thought, okay, cool. This is kind of telling me the story about a person, but it's kind of mysterious the way that some people know some parts about his story, but it's almost like the author is piecing it together as we're piecing it together. And then as the story goes on, like the time goes on. So like This is based on a real person called Saint Cuthbert, who was born, who's from like almost 1,300 years ago. And it's crazy because that's such a long time ago. But then also at the same time, like he inspired so many people. So many people gravitated to him. So when it starts with fragments, it starts with somewhat of being told about him being moved and traveled and his body, and you don't really know exactly what's going on, and the story continues through the years, and as the years go on, the story kind of comes more into focus, and you kind of understand a bit more of what's going on past the elusive past the elusive moment of kind of understanding who Cuddy is. Then you get to know Cuddy more through the people who follow him, the people who are protecting his remains and trying to find a final resting place for him. How the story goes is he's moved from place to place as he's being protected by his followers, and they move him just to protect him from like wars and battles that are happening around him. And around the time, like the Vikings are invading and stuff like that, and they need to move him. And all within this time, the legend of Saint Cuthbert reigns strong, and people from all over the world are making pilgrimages to either help support and protect him and get him to a final resting place, a safe place, or just to say thanks or give their praise, or, you know, be part of the story. And once the story fully takes focus is once you get to the final section, which is what I'm in now. And it's almost like the constant changing of form comes to a point of stability. Stability in the form of a story. Now, this story is more of a prose, but by the time you get to this point in the book, you're like, you know what? I'm ready for a story, you know? I'm ready to read this story. And it changes, it tells you this story of, I'm trying to figure out how to put it into words without spoiling it. So how do I put this? It tells the story of a curious person, which is a moment why a person who's curious about his surroundings and asking questions about the history and what's going on. And I find myself becoming quite connected to this person because I'm quite a curious person myself. And what does this say? Oh yeah, there's moments where there's like, oh, Cuddy, oh, Cuddy, oh, like they're chanting. And when I was reading at the time, I was thinking, what is this weird refrain? And now I get it. They were chanting. They were kind of moments of solace within the book, I guess. And then in a strange way, this book kind of connects to my festival experience, in the sense that Saint Cuthbert changes and changed the people who he encountered, or even people who just heard about him felt changed or in awe of him. People followed him, they preserved his stories, they pilgrimed to carry his influence long after his death. And when he found his final resting place in Durham Cathedral, they pretty much built the cathedral around him to preserve his memory. So he was such an influential person that the things he said and the stories he told were scribed down so that they could be told forevermore, known forevermore for future generations. Exactly the words that St. Cuthbert said, or interpolations. And then we move on to the kind of the connection of the band, the keyboard player Odd Job Man from Vibe Machine, having an encounter 26 years ago that pretty much changed another person's life, or the trajectory that his life was on. And then even the moment with me, with my friend telling me that one day I'm going to have a moment where I'm going to have a switch in position about how I see poetry and music. So it makes you think, or makes me think even, how much of a life story can begin with one conversation. I mean, I guess you could create a whole world from one conversation. And then that brings me on to going into Brunswick Bookshop, because, you know, that's my Friday thing. When I went into the bookshop last week, Friday, the manager asked me if I had moved my working location. And I was just like, yeah, we've moved to another place. It's just not far from here. It's like a 20, 30-minute walk from where I was before. But the downside to that is just that I can't just pop in on my lunch break and go to the bookshop and have a look around some books. But within that, I just said, well, you know, I'm still gonna come down here because I need my weekly book prescription filled. And she was just like, thank you for coming. And I'm just started thinking that it's interesting that I made the effort to go down to the bookshop because I enjoy the space. But it's kind of what I was mentioning in my last video, how places become more than just shops or venues. When people notice whether you were there or not, briefly picking up books or not at all, it makes something more meaningful because that's something that someone's noticed from a space that is connected to your story. So when I was in there, I picked up this book, Tomorrow, I think it's called. And mainly because I was someone that one of my friends, I would say, she said that she was reading the book, but she hadn't got through it. But when I heard the title, I was just like, tomorrow. I need to find out what happens tomorrow, or tomorrow and tomorrow. But when I picked up that book, that was the first book I picked up. And then I picked up this book here, which I know I keep saying this every new book I put onto screen sometimes. I'm like, yeah, this will be my next new book. This will be the next book I read. But I think this will actually be the next book that I read. Only because it is a collection of horror short stories, which was interesting because I think I found this on, in the Brunswick, they have a shelf near the door that is, I think, like story dealer suggestions, like things that they're suggesting, or art, like things, recommendations from the story dealers. It doesn't say recommendations from the story dealers. I'm sure it says booksellers or. Don't be going in there and be like, oh, I'm looking for the shelf that says the recommendations from the story dealers. But yeah, and what makes me super curious about this is that, like I said, it's a collection of horror short stories, and I love horror films, you know, but in horror films, you've got the music, the suspense, the jump scares, the editing, the moments that the director wants you to experience through the story that he's trying to tell. But when it comes to a horror book, all the book has is the words and then my imagination to kind of figure up the crazy worlds that are going to be taken down in this horror film. I mean, I'm scared and excited to read this. I mean, I read some of the reviews. It was like, one of them said, a terrific gothic delight. And this was from Ironosen Okoji. Sorry for butchering that name. Then there is review from The Guardian, an impressive debut from a very talented new writer. So that's another thing that excites me. It's a new author. And this is, I assume, in their first book. Then on the back, let's read through the blurb on this one. Because, you know, the book's called Flowers from the Void, and it's by Gianni? Washington? Washington's the surname. Gianna? I can't pronounce that first name, but that is it. Anyway, let's read this blurb, right? It says, some fears never stay buried. A reaper readies herself for her next gruesome assignment. A girl without a shadow finds her soulmate. A bereaved African witch prepares for a showdown with a Salem coven, while elsewhere, living dolls take the place of the deceased. In these 13 bone-chilling stories, nightmares are realized with innovative gothic flair, with macabre intensity. Flowers from the Void pushes the boundaries of reality, friendship and magic. Each world darker than the last, and yet hauntingly close to our own. Now, for me, horror, for me to be scared, I actually have to believe that the thing in the horror can happen to me. If I believe that it could happen to me, then that shit is scary. Jeez. But just the fact of this is left to me, my imagination and the words, I'm excited to see what it'd be like, because I've never read a horror book before. I've read fantasy, I've read crime, I've read many fiction genres, but never horror. So this will most likely be my next book that I read after I finish the last 13 pages of Cuddy. Hopefully this week, so that I can take a new book into my next week. And also when I go on holiday or when I'm on the plane, I can start this new book. Oh my days. And then the last thing that happened at the Brunswick was I was looking on the counter and I saw this bookmark, and the manager at the Brunswick was just like, oh yeah, someone came and dropped those bookmarks in not long ago. And I was just like, oh nice. So I checked it out. I was like, oh, can I have one? And she was like, yeah, sure. It's a bookmark. So when I got, just before recording this video, I was looking down at the bookmark and it says on the front, it says, a question in case you need one. Well, I have questions at the end of all of my shows and in the middle of my videos. So yeah, of course I need one. What's the last conversation you wished had gone on longer? And I was just like, that's a curious question, a really great one. Then I flipped over to the back and it says 12 people, one question, an hour and 45 minutes. Phones in bags, no alcohol, you don't have to speak. One Saturday a month, Central London. Address sent 24 hours before. Then it has a QR code. It says scan to take a seat. And the website at the bottom says thestoryblanket.co.uk. So yeah, I don't know if this will come up in my camera, but this is the front of the bookmark and this is the back. It's kind of far away. Maybe I need to do that. Yeah, that's probably a bit closer. So yeah, that's the front of the bookmark and that is the back. Hopefully you got that in the seconds that I showed it. But when I read that, I was just like, geez, address sent 24 hours before. This sounds so cool. Like me in the room with 11 other strangers, there's one question and we explore it. Some people will talk, some people might not, some people might just say a few things, but we're all there for an hour and 45 minutes. Now this is not even an ad reader. I just got this bookmark at the bookshop and I'm just gassed that one day one Saturday, on 1 month, I'm gonna go to the Story Blanket, and I am going to see what question we're going to be exploring. It sounds super exciting, I'm not gonna lie. And then, yeah. So as we come to the end, I'm thinking maybe music doesn't just soundtrack our lives. Maybe sometimes it becomes one of the ways we remember them. And with everything that I went through last week, I can say that with 100% certainty that, yeah, music is both the soundtrack and the motivator in my life. There's not many moments in my life when I'm not listening to music. Even over the weekend, what album came out? The Games album came out over the weekend. I'm not gonna give a review. It was an album, innit? I'm not gonna diss it. The Game is a fantastic lyricist, but I don't know. It felt like he was throwing a lot of shots at Kendrick Lamar, and basically used that as his rollout for the album, while also simultaneously saying out loud, no, I'm not dissing Kendrick Lamar. While us hearing and lyrically comprehending the lyrics that he was saying, and the audience can see it, but the artist is out there trying to punk fate. Is that the right phrase? Play in our faces, basically, I think is the best way to say. But, that's not about this. But the Games album is an okay album. I think there was only 2 songs that I really liked. The one that had Black Thought on it was pretty dope. And whatever the song was that came after that song. Those are, I think, my 2 favorite standout songs from the album. But yeah, check it out for yourself. Yeah, man. But yeah, like I say, music is a soundtrack and also I want to say an inhibitor, but I don't feel like that's the right word. Maybe it is. But yeah, it sometimes it reminds me of moments in my life. Sometimes it reminds me of people in my life. Sometimes it's both. And sometimes it's just soundtracking me strolling down the street or on the bus or at work or on the train while reading a book. Does anyone else do that? Listen to music while they read books? I do. And I don't know. Sometimes I'm listening to the music, sometimes I'm not listening to music. Most time it's just background noise. Unless like a song comes on and it's really vibey, or a song that I know comes on and I just can't help but sing along and just vibe too much. So I can imagine anyone that's watching me read on the train is just like, oh, this guy looks like he's really into his book. Wait, hang on. Is he just grooving while reading his book? He can't be doing two things at the same time. And I know that you might be thinking that, but at the same time, yes, that is what I'm doing. I'm vibing to that song, singing the lyrics for a bit. I pause at one moment. I'm just like sing, 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 get it out of my system, and then I can just vibe and read. I don't know. Does anyone else do that? Yeah, I feel like now I'm at the end of the video. The question has changed from can music become part of my life, part of your life story, to maybe something like, does knowing how a story has, how a song has been made change what it means to you? Or when does a song stop being just a song? Or maybe it's, can some songs hold completely different stories for different people? But whatever the story is or whatever the question is, I feel like I've completely explored it. So now I throw it out to you, Mr. Audience or Mrs. or whatever audience member. You could be an alien, I don't know. But maybe you're a person. And I throw this question out to you. Is there a song that stopped being just a song because of something that happened in your life? And also, to quote this lovely bookmark from the Story Blanket, what's the last conversation you wished had gone on longer? And with that, I'll call it the end. So thank you for watching. If you enjoyed, please subscribe for some more. And if you didn't, well, I don't know. You watched, didn't you? If you got to this point and you didn't enjoy it and you're still watching me, then you're a fan. Hate watching me. And I thank you for it. So with that, I bid you adieu. Until the next time we do this video do-si-do, 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 yeah. I will see you in the next video. Bye. I was going to say peace, but then, because you know the two fingers, and then I said bye. But yeah, bye, 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 bye. See you in the next one. Unless I see you first. Does that make sense?